Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
You are welcome here.
No matter your religious beliefs or lack of belief, you are welcome here.
No matter your age, sex, sexual orientation or gender identity, you are welcome here.
No importa tu ciudadanía, tú estás bienvenido aquí.
No matter your citizenship, politics,
or relationship status.
No matter your physical characteristics or health, you are welcome here.
Whoever you are, wherever you are from,
you are welcome in this place. Good morning, and welcome to the online worship for the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Montgomery, situated on the land of the Muskogee Creek people. It is February 28, 2021. My name is Lynn Hopkins. I'm so glad that you could join us here this morning. I'd like to invite you into this hour of worship with words written by the Reverend Dr. Yvonne Seon. Each of us comes from a different place, yet all we are one. We carve for ourselves our own unique space, yet all we are one. We learn how to speak, eat, dress, cook, and play in different ways. Our common homeland we have not a trace, yet all we are one. We kill, maim, and harm one another with no thought for God's will. We forget the one God and one grace, yet all we are one. On a mountain in East Africa, near Olduvai Gorge, our common mother, Eve, says that we come from one human race, and all we are one. I invite those who would like to join me in speaking our congregational covenant. We, the members and friends of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Montgomery, promise to serve our community with open minds, willing hearts, and helping hands as we respect one another, honoring that our perceptions may differ, value our differences, working to better understand them in conflict, give joyfully of ourselves, being in harmony with our capabilities, and embrace our connections with each other, nature, the global community, and the great mystery of life. And now we hear from our coordinator of religious education, Roger Burdett, with A Time for All Ages.
If you like learning about far-off places, if you like kittens, if you like hearing about real people doing really good things out of the kindness of their heart, then I think you're going to like today's story. Welcome to Time for All Ages. Thanks to Liz Campbell for alerting me to this book, The Catman of Aleppo, written by a couple of Alabama residents, Irene Latham and Kareem Shamsi Basha. Syria has been torn apart by war. This story is about a man named Allah. Allah did not flee Syria the way many people did. He was an ambulance driver. He stayed in town. He wanted to help people. So through this story written by Irene and Kareem and these beautiful illustrations by Yuko Shimizu, let's find out more. This story starts with a note from our protagonist, the Catman himself, Muhammad Allah al-Jalil. Dear reader, this is a story about cats and war and people, but most of all, it's a story about love. Together, we can make the world a better place. Allah loves his city of Aleppo. He loves its narrow alleys and covered bazaars, selling pistachios, jasmine soap, and green za'atar. He loves the boiled corn and dried figs offered on the street. Most of all, he loves the people of Aleppo. They are gentle, polite, and loving like him. Even when war comes to Aleppo, Allah doesn't flee like so many others. He continues his work as an ambulance driver. He swerves through rubbled streets and carries the wounded to safety. He comforts and holds them. Allah's work is important, but he misses his loved ones. Where are they now? Are they safe? He misses the way things used to be before the war. Aleppo's city center no longer echoes with the rich, exciting sounds of copper pot pounding and traditional sword sharpening. His neighborhood is empty, except for the many cats left behind. The abandoned cats roam crumpled buildings and prowl filthy alleyways for food. Their homes have been destroyed, and now no one is left to love them and stroke their backs. No one is there to give them food and water. The cats' lonely, confused faces remind Allah of the loved ones that he's lost. So many goodbyes. So many people he has not been able to help. So many days he feels lonely and confused too. On his way back from home, Allah stops the ambulance. Two cats call to him from the branches of an ancient olive tree. Three more peek from a Syrian juniper tree. Allah's big heart swells with love for them. Bombs may still fall and his loved ones may never come back to Aleppo, but there is something he can do. He can look after the cats. Allah uses the little money he has to buy fresh meat. When he unwraps the meat, the cats raise their heads and sniff the air. They're extra hungry. Tai ata ata, Allah calls. Here, kitty, kitty. A dozen cats rush toward him, their tails high. He gives them bits of meat and talks softly to them. The cats chew and purr and chew. Soon their bellies are full, and so is Allah's heart. He smiles and pets the cats, and they love him back. Allah brings meat and water for the cats every day. A dozen turns into 20. 20 turns into 50. He can no longer care for the cats by himself. I need a place to keep them safe, Allah tells his remaining neighbors. Word spreads, and volunteers arrive. Donations pour in from many different countries. Everybody wants to help the cats of Aleppo. Allah collects enough money to buy a building with a shaded courtyard. He names the sanctuary the House of Cats Ernesto, in memory of a friend's beloved cat. And soon, cats are everywhere. Orange cats, striped cats, white cats, gray cats, black cats. For every cat, there's a dish of food and a bowl of water. And now when people must leave Aleppo, they bring their cats to Allah before they go. Hope and love fill people's hearts when they learn about the sanctuary's success, and they send even more money. With so much support, Allah is able to rescue other animals too. He builds a playground for the children still living in Aleppo. He helps dig a well so everybody can have fresh water. He distributes fruit and ma'amul and barazat cookies to help the people he meets. Allah's big heart is happy. All he did was love the cats, and that love multiplied and multiplied again. He still misses his loved ones in the way Aleppo used to be before the war. But now Allah is known around the world as the Catman of Aleppo. Allah loves his city of Aleppo. He hopes that one day soon its bazaars selling pistachios and jasmine soap will return and he can enjoy eating boiled corn and dried figs. Meanwhile, he loves the sanctuary's courtyard filled with fat, sleepy-eyed cats. There is no place he'd rather be. I hope that inspires you to some kindness this week. Take great care of yourself.
We take a moment in each service to lift up and let go the things that we carry with us through the week. And again and still, we hold in our hearts those who are suffering with COVID infection, those who are caring for others who are infected, those who live in persistent fear of infection. We lift up and hold as well those who suffer from any illness or disability this morning. For those who have received diagnoses with an unclear path ahead. For those who are anxious, worried, living with depression or mental illness. For all those who suffer and we rejoice as well for the good news that we've had, for the celebrations, for the birthdays and anniversaries, the moments that we have been able to share together, the opportunities to continue speaking and connecting with one another. I invite you to use the chat adjacent to the video to offer up whatever is on your heart this morning, that we may hold these things in community.
Sister up, she is not heavy. fall down. I'm gonna lift my brother up, he is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my brother up, he is not heavy. I'm gonna lift my brother up, he is not heavy. If I don't lift him up, I will fall down. I'm gonna lift my people up, they are not heavy. I'm gonna lift my people up, they are not heavy. I'm gonna lift my people up, they are not heavy. If I don't lift them up, if I don't lift them up, if I don't lift them up, I will fall down. If I don't lift them up, if I don't lift them up, if I don't lift them up, I will fall down.
It is our practice to share the undesignated contributions to an organization doing the work on the ground to which we are dedicated in principle. And for this quarter, the Social Action Committee has selected the Capitol Heights Middle School. The employees there are struggling to continue to provide an education and care for the students. They are preparing to return to classrooms soon, and the needs continue to mount.
This is the moment. Put down what you're holding. Everything is changing. Listen to the wind. And when you hear it, you don't have to fear it. Now's the time for healing everything you love. Let's try that together. This is the moment. Put down what you're holding. Everything is changing. Listen to the wind. And when you hear it, you don't have to fear it. Now's the time for healing everything you love. This is the moment. Put down what you're holding. Everything is changing. Listen to the wind. And when you hear it, you don't have to fear it. Now's the time for healing everything you love. Sing it with me, come on. This is the moment. Put down what you're holding. Everything is changing. Listen to the wind. And when you hear it, you don't have to fear it. Now's the time for healing everything you love. This is the moment. Put down what you're holding. Everything is changing. Listen to the wind. And when you hear it, You don't have to fear it. Now's the time for healing everything you love. One more time. This is the moment. Put down what you're holding. Everything is changing. Listen to the wind. And when you hear it, you don't have to fear it. Now's the time for healing everything you love.
So, you know your Black history, right? There was a Black woman on her way home from work back in 54, refused to give up her seat, moved back to the place that was designated for her kind. Except that was 1854, on a streetcar in Philadelphia. And the woman was Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. Frances Harper was born in 1825 in Baltimore. Her parents were free, even though there was slavery practiced still in Maryland. Tragically, she was orphaned at 3 years old. She was raised by her aunt and uncle, who were Black intellectuals, noted abolitionists. They ran a school for Black students. Her uncle practiced medicine and organized a literary society in Maryland. At 13, she started working for a white family in Baltimore. It was customary for kids to start working at that age. It was domestic work, but the family owned a bookstore, and she had access to all the books and devoured everything she could. At age 21, she published her first volume of poetry. 1850 was not a good time to be Black in Maryland. The Fugitive Slave Act was passed in 1850 as part of the so-called Compromise of 1850. And the Fugitive Slave Act entitled slave catchers to capture and transport people who had escaped from slavery back to their place of captivity. Of course, it gave rise to a sort of cottage industry. Violent white perpetrators could make considerable profit by imprisoning Black people whom they found to be alone and vulnerable. The Watkins family closed the school in Maryland, and most of her relatives moved to Canada. Frances went to Ohio and took a job teaching. She was the first female teacher at Union Seminary in Ohio, which was then a school for Black students. From there, she moved to another school in Pennsylvania, where she took a room with William and Letitia Still. Now, William Still was known as the father of the Underground Railroad. And so she had the opportunity there to lend assistance and financial support to that effort. Some accounts say that she actually worked for a time as a conductor on the Underground Railroad, but that's not clear in the history, but she certainly was involved in that work. Now, during this time, Maryland passed a law making any free Black person entering the state to be subject to arrest and imprisonment. so she could never go back to Baltimore. And during this awful period of American history, Francis Walker saw her calling was to work for the abolition of slavery in the country. She had the advantage of having been educated and raised in an educated and relatively affluent family. And she began making public speakers. She was, in fact, a powerful speaker. At her first speech, she was immediately hired as a traveling lecturer for a number of anti-slavery societies, including the Maine Anti-Slavery Society and the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Society. And in addition to this work, she was committed to rights for women as well. She didn't hesitate to publicly and directly challenge the white feminists who claimed the vote for themselves but did not recognize their common struggle with black women.
I feel I am something of a novice upon this platform, born of a race whose inheritance has been outrage and wrong. Most of my life had been spent in battling against those wrongs. But I did not feel as keenly as others that I had these rights in common with other women, which are now demanded. About 2 years ago, I stood within the shadows of my home. A great sorrow had fallen upon my life. My husband had died suddenly, leaving me a widow with 4 children. I tried to keep my children together, but my husband died in debt, and before he had been in his grave 3 months, the administrator had swept the very milk crocks and wash tubs from my hands. I was a farmer's wife and made butter for the market. But what could I do when they had swept all away? Had I died instead of my husband, how different would have been the result? By this time, he would have had another wife, it is likely. And no administrator would have gone into his house, broken up his home, and sold his bed, and taken away his means of support. I say then that justice is not fulfilled so long as woman is unequal before the law. We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity, and society cannot trample on the weakest and feeblest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul. You tried that in the case of the Negro. You pressed him down for 2 centuries, and in so doing, you crippled the moral strength and paralyzed the spiritual energies of the white men of the country. When the hands of the black were fettered, white men were deprived of the liberty of speech and the freedom of the press. Society cannot afford to neglect the enlightenment of any class of its members. I do not believe that giving the woman the ballot is immediately going to cure all the ills of life. I do not believe that white women are dewdrops exhaled from the skies. I think that, like men, they can be divided into 3 classes: the good, the bad, and the indifferent. The good will vote according to their convictions and principles. The bad, as dictated by prejudice or malice. And the indifferent will vote on the strongest side of the question, the winning party. You white women speak here of rights, and I speak of wrongs. I, as a colored woman, have had in this country an education which has made me feel as if I were in the situation of Ishmael. My hand against every man, and every man's hand against me. Let me go tomorrow morning and take my seat in one of your streetcars. I do not know that they will do it in New York, but they will in Philadelphia. And the conductor will put his hand and stop the car rather than let me ride. In advocating the cause of the colored man since the Dred Scott decision, I have sometimes said that I thought the nation had touched bottom. But let me tell you, there is a depth of infamy lower than that. It is when the nation, standing upon the threshold of a great peril, reached out to its hands a feebler race, and asked that the race help it, and when the peril was over, said, "You are good enough for soldiers, but not good enough for citizens." We have a woman in our country who has received the name of Moses, not by lying about it, but by acting it out. A woman who has gone down into the Egypt of slavery and brought out hundreds of our people into liberty. The last time I saw that woman, her hands were swollen. That woman, who was brave enough and secretive enough to act as a scout for the American army, had her hands swollen from a conflict with a brutal conductor who undertook to eject her from her place. That woman, whose courage and bravery won a recognition from our army and from every black man in this country, is excluded from every thoroughfare of travel. So talk of giving women the ballot box. Go on. It is a normal school, and the white women of this country need it. While there exists this brutal element in society which tramples upon the feeble and treads down the weak, I tell you that if there is any class of people who need to be lifted out of their airy nothings and selfishness, it is the white women of America.
The National Women's Suffrage Association, which was led by Elizabeth Cady Stanton, took the position of opposing the 15th Amendment, which would allow the vote for black men, but not any women. And so Frances and her good friend, Frederick Douglass, created the American Women's Suffrage Association to work for the full voting rights of all women. Another one of the things that she became famous for during this time, she was the first ever black woman to publish a short story in this country. And at the time, in literary circles, her name was widely known. She continued to write novels, short stories, and poetry throughout her life. She was also, though, very prominent for her activism, and one of her efforts was to organize a boycott of products produced by slave labor. She said, "How could slavery exist long if it did not sit on a commercial throne?" She recognized, perhaps better than most, how bound up racial oppression was with the system of capitalism that fuels the engine of this country. She worked hard to provide for education for all children, whether their parents could afford it or not, whether they were entitled to it according to state rules and laws or not. She says, "I envy neither the heart nor the head of any legislator who has been born to an inheritance of privileges, who has behind him ages of education, dominion, civilization, and Christianity, if he stands opposed to the passage of a national education bill whose purpose is to secure education to the children of those who were born under the shadow of the institution which made it a crime to read. For Frances Harper, it was terribly important that all of the work she did contributed to a brighter future for her children and for all children. While she lived in Pennsylvania, she had joint membership with the AME congregation and the Unitarian congregation. At that time, if she had perceived a calling to professional work within the Unitarian body, it would not have gone far. In fact, it would be 1981 before we made real the possibility of ordination to pastoral ministry for a Black woman. 1981. That woman was the Reverend Dr. Yvonne Seon. Dr. Seon herself said, "The legacy of racism in America is such that I was first at things that should have happened a long time before I did them." In addition to being the first Black woman ordained in the Unitarian Universalist system, she was a pioneer in the academic field of Black studies. The story of Dr. Seon's career is amazing. She was the first American to work for the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and soon advanced to the most prominent position available to a foreign citizen there. She was 22 years old. When she returned to the United States, she became the first Black woman to serve as the chief administrative officer on a major U.S. delegation to General Assembly of UNESCO, the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. She then completed, while designing, one of the earliest Black Studies PhD programs in the country, and went on to develop a number of groundbreaking courses in the discipline at the University of Maryland and at Howard University. She returned to D.C. and lived there for more than 30 years while raising her children, one of them being comedian Dave Chappelle. She seems unimpressed by the fame that he has garnered in his career, but her work is awe-inspiring. She also worked with students at Wright State University in Ohio to found the Black Cultural Resources Center there, which became a model nationally for other higher education institutions. She later returned and became the director of the Black Cultural Resources Center there, following her retirement from a teaching job in the D.C. area. She was, as the first Black woman to be ordained within the system, up against some serious barriers to settlement, and in fact never attained a conventional settlement. She ultimately founded an intentionally multicultural congregation in Maryland and the suburban D.C. area. It was the first ever intentionally multicultural plant church within the Unitarian Universalist Association. There have been a number of efforts since then, but hers was the first. And she served there for several years until ultimately they were unable financially to sustain a full-time minister, and she retired from the ministry. Her grandmother had been a Pentecostal bishop, and Dr. Seon experienced the call to ministry at the time of her grandmother's death. And she believed that she was being led to pursue a life of spirituality and quest in professional ministry. But she says, eventually I came to see that my own task within Unitarian Universalism was to change the denomination, not to be changed by it. I felt as though, in order to be accepted, I would have to become someone other than I was. I would have to give up my Afrocentricity, and I was not willing to do that. So I began to look at, how does the denomination need to change? And the conclusion I came to was that the denomination has always been open, but it has never been inclusive. At the moment, it is closer to being inclusive than it has ever been. We even have a few African Americans who have been teaching at the divinity schools that are Unitarian Universalist. So there is more inclusivity than there has ever been with respect to the African American tradition. Dr. Seon appeared during the General Assembly last summer as the report from the Commission on Institutional Change, Widening the Circle of Concern, was released. Dr. Seon's work and ministry was honored. Perhaps we grow closer to the day when no one need be recognized as the first of anything to enter the Unitarian Universalist community, whether as a lay leader or a professional. We say and we believe all are welcome here. But the challenge, as Dr. Seon points out, the denomination has always been open, but has never been inclusive. May we learn from the wisdom and witness of Frances Ellen Watkins Harper a century before, and Dr. Yvonne Seon in the mid to late 20th century, and those who are walking this path today. May we overcome the legacy that we have written for ourselves to be welcoming, but not inclusive. We aspire to more. We covenant to more. And yes, there is no doubt that we are making progress. What we cannot do is relax. In the coming weeks, I'm going to be telling you about some other remarkable leaders, figures in Unitarian Universalism, historical and present, and what I believe they have to offer to us here today. Join us for second hour discussion over on Zoom. You want to talk about diversity in the Unitarian Universalist community. You want to talk about overcoming the barriers and obstructions that we have set up for ourselves. You want to talk about something else. Come on over. We'll be there at 11 o'clock. We run until about noon. And there's a lot of other stuff going on. 2 weeks from tomorrow begins our book study on Zoom. How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. If you are interested, you're going to want to sign up soon. It's filling up. And there are other things going on all the time, so keep an eye on our calendar, on our Facebook group, and on your email. For now, our service has ended. May our service begin.